Before I dive into the slides, I'll just tell you a little bit why a cloud architect is talking about teaching big data at universities. So I came from Cognos, and Cognos was acquired by IBM in, I think it was 2008. And we had a tiny little office in York, in the UK, with 20 people. And it was a very nice office in a very nice location. And when IBM took us over, we thought we would probably get away with staying there for a while. But IBM came in and said, well, actually, the rent's a little bit high for this building. This isn't quite the IBM standard. And you've all got these giant spaces and stuff like that. So we were like, oh, well, OK. And we have this other office, which is this huge building on a motorway. And we'd like you to move in there. And we were like, well, that doesn't sound quite so good. So we resisted this for a little while. And then someone suggested to us, have you thought about actually working in the university? We're like, no. Why would we work in the university? Well, we were talking to the university, and they would really like to have some IBM people present on the campus. And we're like, really? Why would they want that? And so cut a long story short, after about a year of negotiating, we ended up in the computer science department on the new campus at the University of York. And day to day, we get on with our day jobs, but obviously over time, because you're in academia, you've got the students around you, you start kind of getting involved. You just can't help it. And you start giving the odd lecture about things that you know, and then they start asking about IBM and the other things IBM's doing. And before you know it, you're giving a lecture on something that you really knew nothing about. But IBM knew lots about it, so you were able to find people in IBM to give you the content, etc. So that's why I'm here. Just to answer the question is, why would an IBM person want to help academia? IBM has a fantastic technical career path. And part of one of the attributes they look for people is something that they call eminence. And they'll sort of say, well, how eminent are you feeling today? So what is eminence? So one of the things that makes you eminent is delivering lectures at universities. And if you do get involved in that sort of thing at IBM, that's looked as a really good thing on your kind of internal CV. So IBM is actually highly motivated for their own career to come and help you deliver stuff. And obviously they know lots about the practical application of these tools. And that's a fantastic resource. I mean, some of the previous talks were talking about, this isn't a well-established field. And that's true in an academic sense. But there are people going out with customers, delivering real solutions based on these tools. And you can tap into those people. So it's kind of the crux of where we're going to go with this. So about 2 years ago, I was at one of these eminence events where we talk about eminence and how we're going to become eminent. And it was suggested to me, given that I had been giving some lectures at the university, that we should look at actually doing this more formally and how we can roll this out in the UK to other universities. So I said, OK, fine, I'll see if I can find some time to do that. And it turned out there were loads of people in the UK who wanted to get involved with this. So there's no shortage of volunteers. And in fact, our challenge was kind of focusing that in and trying to get it down to a small enough group of people that we could actually make progress. And once we'd done that, things really started to build. And one of our partners that we partnered with very early on, and mostly because there's quite a long history of IBM collaborating with them, was Warwick University. And so you can see here it mentions Dr. Strauss, who's the academic director at the Business Analytics MSc at Warwick. And sadly, he couldn't be here today. But I have some slides from him, which I'm certain I won't do justice, but we'll see how it goes. So a quick agenda, and we'll be kind of skipping through this fairly quickly, I think. So we'll talk about how we got started. It was about 2 years ago, so it was actually probably 2011. But we really did start really getting going in early 2012. We'll talk a little bit about how Warwick see the collaboration, how it fits in with what they're doing. Then we'll talk about this year, where we've been hectically building content for the module, talk about our current status, and we're actually about to go kind of live with the module. Now I'll talk to you about some of the detail about what's actually in the module, why we chose those things, talk about some of the challenges, which some have already been mentioned. We'll talk about the zoo case study, and I'll talk more about zoos in a minute. We'll talk about assessing and workshops and how we plan to deliver that side of things. And then how we plan to scale it. So right now this is a UK initiative. We're focused on UK universities. So how are we going to scale it in the UK? And also a little bit about how that may scale to other geographies and how we may share this across IBM. There's lots of complementary things going on. So we're far from the only people doing this. And I think there are other people in this room with IBM who are doing similar things. And I'll show you how we're kind of promoting ourselves internally in IBM, because eminence is very important. So I think people have mentioned some of the kind of hype around big data, data science, the news stories that there's a shortage of skills. And these were all from around the time when we really started talking about this. And that was really one of the things that was driving us. And we went to a few universities and asked them, is this real? And some of them said, well, no, not really. We're not really seeing it because you're not coming to us with requests for these people. So do you need these people? And we're like, well, actually, yes, we do. And they were like, well, you should have told us, and then we would have started pumping these people out of the courses. So I think there is a bit of a kind of a cycle there that needs to get closed. So I mentioned like a few years ago, and we kicked off this was our mission. So we said about, what is this project about? So we came up with this mission statement. So we want to increase the supply of graduates for business analytics, development, consultancy, and services within IBM, in ICAS, IBM UK. We want to enhance IBM's reputation, eminence, and dialogue in the field of analytics in academic research. So you see the eminence thing coming out again. We want to increase engagement with universities. We want to use this as kind of a trigger for more collaboration between IBM and the university. And that may also be able to link that in with government initiatives, particularly if you think about Smarter Planet and Smarter Cities. There's a plethora of opportunity that this can help us kind of have some influence. So we want to enhance current courseware around analytics. We want to increase research. So as this goes on, we will see that kind of dialogue and collaboration moving into research and joint research with IBM. And trying to define the space. It's been mentioned that the whole space is a little bit ill-defined right now. So I think this came out in 2012, and this was an announcement from Warwick launching this module. And I won't read it out, but we saw this with, actually, that sounds quite good. Is that us? But it definitely is. And we aren't the only industry organization working with Warwick. SAS are also doing a text analytics course with them. So we're kind of competing there as well, which is quite exciting. So, and then at this point we kind of panicked because that press release came out and we didn't actually have any content. So we had to kind of like think, well, we better get on with this because they've announced the course now and there's our names on it, so it's going to be a bit of a problem if we don't have it. And part of the panic was we didn't really understand what an academic module looked like. We're very good at kind of getting up and talking on PowerPoints for hours on end, but they started talking about learning outcomes, and we're like, learning outcomes, okay, what's that then? So we worked that out, and they were very helpful, both Manchester, which was the other university we started to collaborate with very closely. They kind of sat us down and said, it's actually very simple, you don't need to panic, this is actually going to be quite easy. But one of the things that really came over was this kind of mixed media session. So it was like a 3-hour session was their lectures, and we're like, 3 hours, wow, that's unbelievable, that's going to be really boring. How can you stick with 3 hours of PowerPoint? And they said, don't do 3 hours of PowerPoint, that will be a disaster. Please don't do that. So we kind of structured it like this, where we assume a late start, all the students will wander in late and whatever, and then when they're finally all there, do an introduction and some kind of overview of the topic, and then try and do some sort of discussion type exercise, which kind of gets them all engaged. and maybe some kind of a video demo of some software or some kind of view from the field. Then dive into one of the topics, and there'll probably be 3 topics in the whole thing. But don't just kind of teach the topic through PowerPoint. Also, again, try and do demos or group exercises to keep the students engaged. And basically then repeat that with breaks. Whether we actually go with the 2 breaks or whether that's just 1 longer break, it's really going to depend on the lecture. So once we saw this, we felt much better, because it was like, well, actually, really, that's just 3 short-ish presentations, and then we're going to have to think about how we do the group exercises and things. So that's not too bad. So we felt much better. So we initially planned for 8 3-hour lectures, so 24 contact hours. That's kind of, I think, the contract with the university is structured like that. Actually, we've got lots more than that, and we've got quite a lot of flexibility as to how we kind of glue these things together, depending on the context of the course. So a lot of you have mentioned prerequisites, but obviously there's other modules going in parallel. So we don't want to overlap too much, although repeating stuff's probably no bad thing. But also we just need to be aware of what were the prerequisites for that entire thing, and maybe there are certain things we can't do because of that. So we do have quite a lot of flexibility. Very clear that the module is actually managed and owned by the university. It's nothing really to do with us, other than that people turn up on the day and we give the lectures. But the actual kind of management of it, the assessment of it, it's got to be with the university. We're not experts in that in any way. But we are providing guidance to them, and particularly around the workshops, and we've all been in workshops today, and we plan to use those specific workshops or something very close to that. Not as a mandatory part of the course, but as something optional that if you do want to get involved with the IBM software, fine. And we've got those workshops and other software in the academic initiative that can be used. And we've had lots of input. So these are the slides that Dr. Strauss shared with me, just to give you some context. And this is just one example. I mentioned we're doing this with Manchester. We're actually starting to do a little bit with Exeter. And there's a slowly growing queue of other universities. So just a little bit about the business school. So it was founded in 1965. There's a fair number of 60s formed universities in the UK. It's got some fancy-looking buildings. It's completely misnamed, by the way. I think it's good that he's put a map on there. Warwick University is not in Warwick. It's in Coventry, or on the outskirts of Coventry. So if you're driving to Warwick, you've gone to the wrong place. But I guess Warwick's a better sounding place, so they named it after Warwick. 30 departments, 24,000 students. And then the business school was founded in '67. It's highly ranked in the UK and quite highly ranked in Europe and reasonably highly ranked in the world, and 200 academic staff, so it's a pretty large department. Lots of degree programs, 8,000 students right across the spectrum. Very good indeed. And I guess what's interesting is that they have an existing MSc in Business Analytics established in 2008. So that's actually pretty impressive. I was quite surprised that it's been going for that long. It's a bit of a cheat because it was called something slightly different. I think it was called Business Analytics and Consulting. And if you look at its content, I didn't think there was much that I would have called Business Analytics in it. But that worked for them, so that was good. It was much more like what I call an operational research MSc. It's been wildly popular, way more popular than they thought it would be. Intake 70 students. They originally planned for it to be about 20 students, I think. So I hope we don't mess that up for them. And there's fees, so you have to pay, but you have to pay for everything in the UK now, so that's not unusual. One thing that is unusual is that their strong numeracy, stats ability, and English speaking levels are quite high on their intake. And if you look at their competition, particularly the English speaking, is a much higher level than most of the other universities doing this. And that's quite important because of their last bullet, which is teaching by practitioners, because they're getting lots of people coming in who may not be as nuanced with teaching methods when you're teaching students who don't have strong English, which is definitely going to be the case for us. So, yeah, so I think that's quite interesting, and that they definitely try and distinguish themselves that way. And I guess that previous point, they're aiming for 10% teaching by practitioners. That was kind of an important underpinning of this entire MSc. So they really want us to come in and do this. It's kind of part of their mandate. And I think that's common across a lot of their modules and degree courses. So they've done some analysis on what their target audience is. So the application analyst role, and it'll be interesting to see if they ever change this to be data scientist at some point. But they're still going for more kind of traditional consulting analyst type roles here. And you can see what some of the companies that they're targeting this for. And certainly when we looked at this, we were fairly confident this profile would fit the kind of hires that IBM's looking for, particularly in its consulting division. So yeah, this is quite interesting. And they've done some, or this is some research that they use, these guys, Liberatori and Luo. There's some definitions of different aspects of business analytics and teaching, which I think we may even have a slide on. So the course looks like this, or it will look like this. This is how it's going to look next year. This year it's slightly different. I'll explain that in a minute. So there's 4 core modules, and then they have to pick 4 out of those other 10. And you can probably see there that there's quite a lot of the legacy of a operational research consulting type degree. But we're the new bit, analytics in practice with IBM. We will be a core module, but we're not this year. It's too risky because we've not done it before. So we're trialing it out this year. But we will become a core module the year after, if everything goes well. And you can see there also that there's SAS doing the text analytics module over there. So this was this research as well. So there are these quantitative skills ranked. And this is basically within the kind of analytics space and what people are looking for, I guess. And it's quite interesting. So they had a lot of statistics already, so they had that covered off. They had a little bit of data mining, so they had that covered off, and they have quite a lot down the bottom around simulation and optimization. But they didn't have anything on visualization and data management, which is where they see us coming in. Now the reality is we're also covering a little bit of statistics and quite a lot of data mining. So we're fairly broad as well in our content. But we're really addressing what they saw as a key gap. So where are we now? Someone kind of mentioned the defining big data, and I think it's even more vague if you just talk about analytics. So what is analytics? So we spent quite a bit of time debating that ourselves. What should we include in this? Shall we kind of focus it around the more kind of exciting new things around big data? Or shall we also do some of the preliminary kind of visualization, business intelligence type content? And really, we only really twigged when we looked at the existing module that we would need to do that kind of introductory stuff. It would be critical, just because it's not covered anywhere else. And if we just dive straight into big data, the students will be completely lost. They'll have no clue. So we decided to do basically a little bit of everything. And a bit like the previous speaker, that actually leads to a lot of content to cover in not a lot of time. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it pans out. We also decided to focus on the in-practice element. So not to really teach the tools and the technology in any depth. We're obviously going to have to touch on it. But really to talk about how these tools are being used in practice by IBM and other companies, and what problems they're being used to solve, and what the value is in solving those problems. And that's actually a real challenge for us, because a lot of us are fairly technical, and we love talking about our technology, and we love talking about how to sell why our technology is better than everyone else's technology. And we have to kind of rein that back and say, let's not do that. Let's just tell the students how it's being used. So that's really interesting, but it's also quite hard, because you need to tell them a little bit about the tools in order to explain how they're being used. And you need to tell them a little bit about the tools in order to explain what the challenges are around it. So it's trying to get that balance. And I think we're finding that quite difficult, but we'll probably have to do this once, at least, to learn what works and what doesn't. But we do want to do the kind of interesting stuff as well. So we want to talk about things like Internet of Things, big data, data science, cognitive computing, Watson. You know, there's a whole lot of excitement there. And we're going to kind of hold that to the end and then kind of drop that on them and say, this really is an exciting space. And please come and work for IBM. But we also think the fundamental stuff, which wasn't being covered anywhere else, is actually even more important now. So just simple stuff like visualization is absolutely critical. So covering that off really early and then repeatedly going back to it, I think is going to work quite well. Ethics was mentioned, and we've got some very good content around ethics. So the group that this project has kind of been run out of also did, I think it's a white paper on ethics. And there's some quite interesting outcomes in there. And we're going to kind of delve into some of that in one of the lectures. So there's a lecture that's probably about half of it is just on ethics and the challenges around that. And it's actually a really interesting lecture. And we've also encouraged the people creating the other lectures to mention ethics where it's important, to kind of give the students a glimpse of that big challenge that's to come, and then we'll focus on it right at the end. We're using this thing that's from a partner called Align Analytics. I think it's called the Business Analytics Experience, and it's a simulation or a game that is used by our marketing department when we really want to introduce companies to analytics and the value of analytics. If they've never kind of done any analytics before, we get them in and they play on this game, groups of 5 or 6 people, basically trying to manage a business against each other, and then it runs simulations in the background. It's using some of our software. But it's actually, we decided it's kind of a fun way to introduce the whole concept of why companies use analytics. So we're going to do that. There's a little bit of a cost associated with it, but it's not terribly significant. We've done quite a good deal with the company because it's in an academic perspective, and because it's also using software that the universities could have got for free through the academic initiative. So there isn't really a big competitive thing going on there. So it should pan out okay, and every university we've suggested this to has been fine with that, so that's good. And there's just a hint as to how we actually manage the process of creating all this content. Is we meet every week. We have a kind of a virtual meeting on Fridays, which is typically when IBMers have a little bit of time set aside to do things that are not strictly their day job. And it actually helps because it reminds everyone that they haven't done anything the whole week on this. And then they spend the entire weekend dedicating their time to this, so it's fantastic. So I'll talk a little bit about what's in there. But like I said, there's a bit of everything. So we have the game to kick it off, which should really inspire the students and they have a bit of fun. And it's a really nice way to go. We have what we call the high-level view, which is really what I would call Business Intelligence 101. So it covers a little bit of data warehousing, a bit about visualization, a bit about the life cycle of data and ETL and that sort of thing. Then we have this thing that we call challenges, which is really just taking a deeper dive and getting a little bit more into what it's like to run a kind of production enterprise BI system. We're a little bit concerned about that it gets fairly technical. And talking about prerequisites, we are running this at business schools, not at computing departments. So some of the students will have computing, but the vast majority won't. So we have to be pretty careful we don't lose them on there. We've got some ways of dealing with that. So we've got some content that's much more about stories about customers and successes they're having, and less about the tool. So we're just going to play that by ear, depending on the department and the particular course that we're running it in. We'll either go a little bit more technical or we'll keep it high level. We've got to think about financial performance management, and that's actually the area that I work in, so I couldn't not have that section in here. So it's much more around the kind of finance department and managing the data around the finance department. So there's some stuff about enterprise budgeting. But some of that gets quite interesting as well, because we touch on some of the issues you get with people gaming budgets. And, if you have a budget, you're going to spend it, otherwise you lose it, and that sort of thing. So it's actually got quite a nice business angle to it that I think it's good that the students understand. Then we get into the 2 lectures on predictive. And this is quite interesting as well, because some of the courses that we're running this in, there's already quite a lot of content like this. So we're needing to be careful that we don't duplicate what's already done, or if we do duplicate what's already done, we're talking about more about the practical aspects of these tools. So whilst that looks like a slam dunk of predictive 101, data mining 101, it actually doesn't come over like that. It's much more of a story around how our customers are using these tools and why those different aspects are useful or cause challenges in that context. And then finally, after all of that, we get onto big data. And we have quite a nice lecture which kind of talks firstly a little bit around data at rest, so Hadoop, etc., and big sheets. And then we talk about data in motion, so streams, etc. And we've got some really nice, I guess, real-life customer stories around that as well. And then the next to last one is Watson. So we start here to move more about how you can build the kind of next generation of cognitive computing systems. But it's still underpinning, we're using the same tools. We're using predictive, we're using data, we're using big data, but we're gluing it all together and we're building applications that are actually doing really interesting things. So we talk about Watson, we talk about Watson in healthcare. Because we're in the UK, I think we're also talking about Watson in insurance, which is something that's been going down recently in the UK. And then we talk about kind of a more abstract cognitive computing life cycle and how you can just build these yourselves, essentially. And then, like I mentioned, we get onto ethics and project challenges. So after all the excitement, we bring them back down to earth with a bang and basically make them really depressed about all of this. But yeah, so that's the structure. So talk a little bit about challenges. So, and I think we've touched on this in the other talks as well, prerequisites is very interesting. We've got a really mixed audience. We don't really know what backgrounds the students have got. Some are really strong in computing, some are really strong in business, some are really strong in the technology and the statistic tools and all of that stuff. But none of them have all 3. So we really have to cover all bases and just not really assume anything. We do know what level they're at, so unfortunately we're also targeting this at completely different levels. So second-year undergraduates in one case at Manchester and MSc in Warwick. Now, my view is that's a massive difference. The way we're going to deal with that is we're going to try and use the same content, but we're essentially going to go a lot faster and a lot deeper at the master's level and keep it, just go a little bit slower and not cover anywhere near as much in the undergraduate one. But I think that's going to be a real skill for us, particularly the first time we do this at both, to not kind of assume that they're both the same. So that's really where we're reliant on the university to guide us and review the content we're sending them. And they have to say, actually, no, this is crazy. There's no way they're going to learn all of this. and just set expectations with us as to how much we can get through. So that's going to be kind of interesting. I've mentioned before the challenge of us kind of deep diving on technology. Again, we're going to be reliant a little bit on the universities to tell us when we're doing that and to stop doing that. But, you know, we'll see how that goes. Keeping the material engaging. Again, our default mode is to create loads and loads of slides and talk forever. So we're trying to do that, and we're already seeing that the modules I'm getting, I get 120 slides for this 3-hour lecture. Now, you probably can go through 120 slides in a 3-hour lecture, but no one's going to have any fun. So we've kind of set a limit, 50 slides, that's it. If there's more than 50 slides, we're in trouble. And that really forces them then to think through how we're going to make this more interesting. Little YouTube videos, group exercises, all of that stuff need to get thrown in. Assessments, workshops, getting access to the tooling in a consistent way. So I guess until today, I was a little bit unsure on how this was going to pan out. But now I've seen some of the workshops we've got. I think we've got a good base there that we can use. We're obviously going to have to decide which of the workshops to use, but I've got a fairly good idea already. And actually, both universities are already using software through the academic initiative. That obviously won't be true with some of the others that we get to, but there's already heavy use of SPSS Modeler in both cases, and one of them's already using Cognos Insight. So it's not a big challenge for us at the moment. I think it will become increasingly so as we go to universities that have different tools. So they've already got Hadoop, some other distribution, or they've already got SAS for the predictive stuff. We're just going to have to leave that to the university if we can't really dive in and help. But I think we've got plenty of stuff that we can cover that off if we need to, and it seems to be pretty well put together. The stuff about being able to download it in a VM, I think that's fantastic. I think that's going to solve a lot of our problems. Theming and making the lectures flow. So in the initial reviews of the lectures, different people have different styles and kind of bring in different types of story. So we actually thought it was going to be useful if we have some way of theming it. And that's where we brought in this zoo theme, which might sound, why a zoo? But if any of you are familiar with IBM's press releases and marketing, for some reason, we actually quite often use zoos. There's 2 or 3, and there's quite a lot of content around there, so YouTube videos, etc. So we can obviously build on those. And actually, I think a zoo is a really nice example for students because everyone knows what a zoo is. Everyone knows how a zoo makes money. There's some really interesting kind of examples around tracking where people go around the zoo, where you put your sweet stands, what sort of food you have where in the zoo. All that kind of stuff, what time do you clean the elephants? There's some really amazing little stories where you can actually start to use big data in interesting ways to kind of meld that in with stuff that's going on at the zoo. So we decided to go along with the zoo theme. So we've done that all the way through all the lectures. We talk about this mythical zoo, and we talk about how the different tools can be used at the zoo. So sounds crazy, but that's what we've done. And we're then kind of reinforcing things with the workshops and with different case studies that are already out there. So the students will be able to download them from the IBM website and look into them in more detail. So it's that side of it's really easy. The other thing we decided to do was avoiding proprietary tools. In fact, we're trying to avoid any tools. So the actual lectures, we don't talk specifically about our tools, IBM tools, or the competition's tools. We might mention them because we can't help ourselves. But we're really focusing on how the tools are used. Obviously in the workshops, that's when we actually need to use the tools. Getting speakers, availability, lack of experience in teaching. We've had no problem getting volunteers. Lots and lots of people want to help out with this. But are they the right people? Are they going to be available on the day? That's a little bit harder. And that's always going to be a challenge because almost everyone we're using may end up having a customer engagement during the lecture. So we always need to have backups. So it's more about having a core number of people who you're confident can drop in. We've also, as a kind of a last resort backup, we're doing videos. So there will be YouTube videos of all of our content. And there's already videos out there from IBM on some of these topics. So if really the worst comes to the worst, we can also point the students at those. So that's, again, not too bad. So a little bit about the zoo. I don't think we need to, I think I've mentioned all of this. Lots of exciting things. There is a link to a YouTube that you can watch about the zoo, which is just one of the examples. So how are we going to scale this? Well, that's a good question. So right now we're not really sure. We're not really sure how many people we need to add every time we add a new university into this offering. At the moment, the fact we're doing 2 doesn't really impact us. It could have been 3, it could have been 1. We've got enough people, which is about 10 people, and some of us can cover each other's content. I'm pretty certain when we add a 4th or a 5th, we're going to need more, just because the likelihood of people being off and in different places. It does help that this is certainly true in the UK, the university calendar is completely different at different universities. So Warwick starts on, I don't know, like the 6th of January, and Manchester starts sometime in February. So I don't know why, but that actually really helps us at the moment. So there's almost no overlap between the calendars. But we are working on getting more recruits because we really want to roll this out probably to another 4 universities the year after this, and probably 4 after that again. So we do have a plan to kind of scale it up. We are UK focused, and I think we will always remain UK focused. We're not going to start flying around the world to deliver this content. IBM probably wouldn't pay for us to do that anyhow. It's touch and go whether they pay for us to get to the universities in the UK. So, but you know, we're all motivated to do it. So, and some of the universities in the UK are a long way away from York, which I recently discovered Exeter is a very long drive. So yes, but we do plan to share what we're doing. And I think Dennis over there has a community on DeveloperWorks, and we plan to put all of our content on there, so that other IBMers and other universities will be able to see what we've done. We're actually working a lot with kind of background notes for the speakers, and that also helps us because that helps us get other people onboarded quickly. And I think the other really important thing around it being in the UK is we want to start to involve partners and customers. And obviously that would be difficult to scale worldwide as well. But on a geographical basis, it's quite easy for us to find either a partner or a customer that's located near the university, and to then bring them in and to add a kind of that slightly different perspective of what it's like to be a customer using the software. And I think certainly the business schools, I think, will think that's fantastic if we can do that. So that's definitely in our plan. The other thing we do is a lot of internal promotion of what we're up to, because we just want to get people excited about it, and we want people to know that it's making a difference, and that IBM believes in what we're doing, because that helps keep them on board if they're volunteering their time, and it also helps getting more volunteers on board. So there's kind of a link there to an internal newsletter. We're also looking at what other people are up to. So we're quite aware that we're not the only people doing this. We're quite happy to steal what other people are doing. And equally, we also think what our kind of in-practice focus is slightly different anyhow. But it does mean that what we're doing will complement. Typically, if other people are teaching about the tools, or about the technology, or about the actual theory behind the statistics, they can just tap into our content and use bits of it. And it should work. There should be very little overlap. So I think that's quite interesting. I've already mentioned how we're planning to kind of share this around so that other people can see it. And our long-term aim is not to be doing this forever, except possibly in just kind of little guest appearances. So we actually think eventually the universities will be able to teach this themselves. But I think it's always good to have people from industry come in, and I think the students think that's good as well. So I think there's always going to be a role for us there, But some of the content we're teaching right now, I would say, isn't particularly stuff that we're adding a lot of value to. So the lecturers should be able to do it in the long run. But there are aspects of it that we bring to the table. So I think over time we will limit our involvement to just a couple of lectures rather than doing the whole module. And I've mentioned that we plan to record it. And I think that's it.